How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, great discussion we're going to have today. We're going to talk about the challenge of dealing with celebrity and high-profile inmates. It's going to be a great discussion. I know we've covered it before, but we got some more insight we want to add, including explain the difference between celebrity and high-profile inmates. And my guest today is going to be Joe Pomponio. And guys, if you get a chance, don't forget I got books on the market. 2 books available on Amazon are Inmate Manipulation Decoded and Breaking Boundaries. 2 strong books on inmate manipulation. And I also have 5 books, a little more on the technical side, including report writing, a book for correctional professionals and how to effectively write reports. And those are all available through Blue 360 Media. Link to that is in the description. Let me bring on my guest, Joe Pomponio. What up, Joe?
Hey, morning, brother. How are you?
It's good seeing you, Joe. I know it's been a while. Hey, Joe, you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Joe Pomponio. I'm a retired lieutenant with the Texas Department of Corrections, 29 years and 6 months, and currently working as an assistant jail administrator in our jail division at the Sheriff's Department and a panel member here for Tear Talk.
Yes, we love having you, Joe. Guys, I'm also going to go back and start doing some interviews on site, on location. I got these little Mevo cameras. I actually bought 3 of them already, which allows for different angles. So, it looks good. So basically, as you're recording it from the 3 different angles, you could just kind of tap what you want on the iPad, and then it comes out already edited. It's pretty amazing. And I'm going to get 2 more, I think, for a total of 5. But right now I have 3, which gives me enough for a layout for interviews. So I'm going to try to work on going on some locations, shoot some good interviews. And I kind of miss those days. COVID changed a lot of that. But Joe, we have a good topic today. I mean, it's definitely something that's always trending, housing high profile or celebrity inmates. And without going into too much detail just yet, Joe, how challenging is it?
It's very challenging. It's more taxing than people are aware of. They think that it's just another day of this person being incarcerated and getting what they want. And, it's really taxing on the staff and the administration that's there because they have to exert a lot of energy into this inmate to keep them safe and, to kind of keep things level and flowing.
Yeah. And guys, I just want to quickly go over the difference between celebrity and high profile inmates. I know Russ kind of said it best at one point, like the celebrity inmates, yeah, they're famous. But the high profile inmates, they're the ones that are infamous. So you got one that's focused on their fame where the other is more focused on their crime. So I got some differences here. I just want to take note, and I'd love to get Joe's perspective too. But I have for celebrity inmates, they're individuals who are famous due to their careers, public personas, or societal impacts such as actors, musicians, athletes, or social media influencers. That's a lot now. You see that actually a lot of the true crimes have a lot of influencers getting caught up, whether they're the victims or they're the ones that are causing the crime. And then the high-profile inmates are individuals whose cases or crimes have attracted significant media or public attention, regardless of prior fame. They could be notorious criminals, political figures, or involved in widely publicized cases, like we were doing Richard Allen. So again, the celebrity inmates, they have the prior fame. So their fame often precedes their incarceration. And for the high-profile inmates, their notoriety typically arises from their crimes or legal battle. Now, for media attention, for celebrity inmates, media attention focuses both on their criminal charge and their past achievement or status. And that's definitely true because as they focus this, you're going to see their downfall. So the media loves to throw out who they were and then what they're becoming, especially in the case of P. Diddy right now. So they're going to highlight who he was, this rising or already, not a rising star, so it's already made it in Hollywood, already, had fame and success. Now let's show you where he's at now. They love that extreme. Even in people that are rising stars, they'll definitely mention at that point if they committed a crime that they're a falling star. So they love to kind of bring out both spectrums. The high-profile inmates, our media attention centers primarily on the crime, the investigation, and trial, sometimes making them infamous. And again, we saw that with Richard Allen. We saw that with Wade Wilson, where the focus was on their crime, and that's what brought people's attention. And then as for public perception, for celebrity inmates, public interest may include fascinations with how their fame contrasts with incarceration, sort of what we just said. And high-profile inmates is public interest often stems from the severity of their crimes or the societal implications of their case. And the last part I got is when it comes to correctional management, which we're going to discuss now. For celebrity inmates, extra precautions might be needed for privacy and security due to their fame, which we'll talk about. And high-profile inmates may require protective custody or special housing due to threats, not necessarily fame. And that's something we'll talk about as well. But Joe, what just from your experience, what would be some of the differences in your mind between celebrity and high-profile inmates?
Well, I mean, with the celebrity inmates, you always see the paparazzi there. It's generally a media circus. They seem to be more involved in the celebrity and trying to get their way on the inside track of information of what's going on. Versus your high profile inmates, you still have somewhat of a media circus, but they're more focused on the crime. So they're more at length a little bit, at arm's length from the staff. Whereas, they focus more on the crime than the celebrity status of the person who committed the crime. Where the celebrity, they're pretty much there from start to finish. They want to be there when they're brought in. They want to be there when they're brought out. It's just generally a media circus.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think we're going to kind of where the different insight comes in today is we're going to try to provide both perspectives when it comes to dealing with celebrity inmates and high profile inmates. So let me just move this forward. I thought first we could start off with media scrutiny and public pressure. Hold on, I just want to put that in there. All right, so this to me is very important because the people that are in charge of actually relaying the messages to the public matters, because I think that seems to be a big issue with us right now with the word solitary confinement. When we're making an effort to protect the inmate, it should not be confused with solitary confinement. I mean, I understand the word isolation. I get that. But when people see solitary confinement, they automatically see a punitive aspect, and it kind of makes the department look bad. It puts them in a position where they're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. Like you have a high profile inmate that may require protection, or you have a celebrity inmate that you want to avoid from exploitation or their chance to create influence because they do have celebrity status. So you got to test the waters with them. You can't just put them into general population. So the jail may decide to isolate them when they get to the state prison. If they're convicted, they may decide to isolate them at first because remember the prison is going to be more long-term, but they're probably going to try to, let me isolate this person first and let's just see if we have any concerns that we need to manage. And again, I find that the people that are, trying to explain how the inmates are housed, whether it's high profile or celebrity, they should, kind of break away from solitary confinement because it has too much of a connection to something punitive. And when I say punitive, I mean primitive. I mean, primitive punishment, which is not what we do anymore. I think that what they should do is they should showcase it as what it is. It's a protective measure, and they're being isolated for these reasons. So I think the people that are given the screen time to explain that housing, I think they should be very aware of the words that they're choosing and how people connect those words to either something punitive or something protective. What's your thoughts on that, Joe? That matters to me the most.
Yeah, it does, because people automatically assume that they're in isolation or a solitary environment because of who they are when they get there. I generally prefer the term single cell environment. We have to keep certain things in mind when we're taking in, people with some sort of celebrity status. We're forward thinking. We're thinking about the, not just the celebrity fame. There may be people in population that don't like him for who he is. There may be people that want to try to extort him for who he is. There's all kinds of things that we have to fast forward think on when we're accepting somebody like, with that kind of status. So, for me, I wouldn't necessarily call it a solitary or an isolation cell. I would prefer the term single cell environment. He's in Single cell away from everybody. He still has the same liberties that everybody else has, when it comes to TV, day room, showers, all that stuff. It just sounds more, it doesn't sound nowhere near as harsh as you say, he's in protective custody, or he's in a solitary environment away from everybody else.
Yeah. And guys, the media is unique in this aspect too, because, and maybe this is good for the media to hear, and we've kind of touched on this before. So let's say for celebrity status inmates, sometimes the media does want to focus on their crime. Of course they want to do, but they do put a lot of attention on their conditions inside the prison. And it's crazy how extreme, in some cases, they make these conditions sound, because, again, they want to contrast the high lifestyle to now this lowest level. And I find that when you have celebrity inmates, the big focus could be, yes, it could be on what they've done, but a big portion of that focus is their life now, the fall from grace. And I think when it comes to celebrities, media, they want to know, and sometimes they'll even call the facilities, pretend that they're a family member or anything, just to get some insight. And if you're taking those phone calls, if they're not the emergency contact calling from that approved emergency number, you don't give them any information, because a lot of leaks that happen may not be happening, intentionally. It may be happening because we're getting duped. Because, as I said, the media can make a phone call, and then, it's like, oh, here we go, another phone call for such and such. What'd you tell them? Well, I told them this, this, and this. Yeah, but how'd you verify who that was? Who did you speak to? They said it was. I don't like when you said they said. That means you didn't verify it. And I don't care who they say they are. If they're not calling from that number that's approved, I'm sorry, guys. You could be, whoever it is, but I don't recognize the number. And then for the high-profile inmates, Joe, I saw this with the Richard Allen case, but nothing's ever a catch-all. But even though they did try to focus on solitary confinement, which was a big thing with the confessions, most people were just concerned really about how he did the crime. They wanted to show that it was really him, because at this point they're focused on, finding out who murdered these two females. So yes, there was some focus on his stay, because they made it relevant, because they made the confessions, I guess, if it's a good confession or not, based on his stay in solitary confinement. But to be honest with you, with the high-profile inmates, because the case is ongoing and the intention is built on the crime that they committed, a majority of attention is going to be towards the crime. Yes, people will be concerned about the stay, of course, but I think the big part of the attention is on what they've done. What's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, when it comes to media attention, when it comes to celebrities, it's funny how they love to portray, the fall from grace because of who they are, and whereas the high profile inmates, they focus on more of the crime and try to display the monster that this person is. The way they focus on the two is just, it's crazy how much attention they give it, and how much publication they give it, and how they publicize it. But yeah, there's two totally different aspects when it comes to the media attention. One of them will have pictures as fall from grace, because this person may have been arrested for DWI, this legendary actor or musician, and then you got the opposite end of the spectrum, where, it's not about the fall from grace, it's about the monster that he is. So, it's always negative news sells. It just, how they portray it is two totally different spectrums.
Yeah, and that's a tremendous point that you mentioned. I don't want that to get overlooked. Usually if someone gets caught in for a high-profile crime, it is a high-profile crime. So therefore, the focus is definitely on the crime. But you're right. You could have celebrities. I've dealt with a few that they've done some low-level crimes. Of course, how was their stay? Like when Justin Timberlake got caught with the DUI, how was his stay when he was in the jail? It's not so much about the crime, because the crime itself isn't as fascinating as the fact that the celebrity was doing it. So that's a good point. Now, it doesn't happen 100%, because you do got some crimes like P. Diddy that seems to be huge, and things are still developing. But for the most part, I love what you just did there, Joe. I truly love that, because the crime itself is really what brings the attention. So even with P. Diddy, he is famous, but that crime is also getting a lot of attention because there's a lot of victims. So you got to be wary of both sides. So there could be attention to both things, but for the most part, yes, some of the celebrities come in with low level offenses, but it's their celebrity status that brings the attention. So that's what they're looking at. Where if it's like a Richard Allen, he's a nobody, but what brought him into the limelight was what he's done. So it's got to be, I guess, what Joe just said, the priority of where the limelight is coming from, and then there's the balance of both, the celebrity with a high profile crime. That was all. I thought that was awesome. I got some things here, Joe, just to end on media part. I got media management. So when you assign a spokesperson for all inquiries, try to assign one. Try to keep things consistent. I want to mention that. For celebrity inmates, you're going to want to address public curiosity while protecting their privacy. And then for high-profile inmates, emphasize security and policy adherence. And that makes sense. If the guy's being brought in or the female's being brought in because of their crime, well, their crime may not be well received in the inmate population. So here's our efforts to protect them, where for the celebrity, okay, this is some information that we can provide you, but we don't want to get too much into how his medical care is being handled or what he's eating daily. We want to be able to make sure that they're allowed some level of privacy, because here's the other thing. The wrong thing gets leaked out, that they could sue the facility. Why are you releasing my how many times I've seen the doctor this week? Why do they need to know that? Or why do they need to know I got a simple allergy to peanuts? Yeah. It's then I got secure information. So you want to prevent unauthorized leaks about either type of inmate, as celebrity details can attract paparazzi, while high profile information can fuel public outrage. So that's interesting. And then social media monitoring, address misinformation promptly, particularly for celebrity inmates who may attract online speculation. I want to mention something on that, Joe. These podcasts, stuff like that, especially during the true crime, sometimes they just run with stuff that's really not validated. And the problem is, if we're not monitoring it, the inmate could be at risk. So there always has to be someone that's also trying to see what is trending right now. Like, go through social media, see what's being said, go to those groups. So there's a lot involved. And I'll tell you something, the investigators that work for these prisons and jails, they got a lot of work when they get those high profile inmates, because if this is a hot topic, they got to make sure that the topics are sort of staying relevant and then don't trend on something that is crazy. Like in the P. Diddy's case, they were talking about food and all this other stuff, and P. Diddy had pulled back and said, I didn't make any of those complaints. So again, that's complaints about his living conditions that can make the facility look bad, and then in the Richard Allen, now they're talking about that he could have other victims, some unsolved case from a woman or a young girl from like 2005 or something. Forgive me on the date, but I think it's that early, and they're trying to debunk it. And I think they may have debunked it. But with that said, all of a sudden this rises up, and now that creates more animosity towards them. But ain't that unique? We never touched on that from that perspective before, Joe.
No, we haven't, and it's uncanny how the media can create a shitstorm just with a simple sentence from something that they never really validated. All it takes is a simple, unvalidated sentence to sway the popular media opinion of the people who watch it or read it or see it. It's crazy. It's crazy how the media will sometimes do that, either for the ratings or for their popularity or, whatever the case is. When it comes to releasing information about a celebrity or high profile, either way it goes, you still have to keep their privacy in mind, and it's very, very important to only have one person who's representing the agency as a public information officer. And when it comes to what they release, it's the KISS method is the best. Keep it simple, stupid. Don't divulge any information that can be misconstrued by anybody, especially by the media, because the media will take it and run with it. And, next thing you know, you have you have a shitstorm on your hands of answering questions from uppers about how this got out, why this got out, how did they interpret this, and it's always better to keep the information simple, just like you would with anybody else, especially when it comes to people coming into your facility, whether it be county or state, generalized information. When they come into your facility, you're automatically going to ask them who their emergency contact is, and for some sort of visitation list as to who they're authorized to release information to. You shouldn't release anything medical unless there's some sort of crucial or critical medical incident that happens with somebody. It's just best to keep the information simple.
Yeah, I agree. Simple and consistent.
Absolutely.
Simple and consistent. So let's go over something we covered before, but we have to cover it again for this. And we have safety risks from other inmates. This may bleed into the increased security demands and exploitation by other inmates, but let's just let's try to see if we can cover it individually. But it's going to probably bleed in. So for celebrity inmates, obviously we know that their fame makes them a target for jealousy, extortion, or violence. So again, it could be a need to, at least from the jail while they're going through it, to put the inmate through some level of isolation, not solitary confinement, isolation. And again, it makes sense because our number one effort is to protect this inmate from those things. I would also, and we'll discuss about influence later. So, and then when they get to the prison setting, if they're sentenced, you're going to want to weed them off that. But you still may want to keep them in protective custody. But protective custody is a layered process. It starts off with very little interaction with other inmates, but on the prison setting, it's like, hey, this is going to be long term. So we got to introduce them to some level of congregation. We don't want to keep the person there for that long. So what we're going to do is, when we know it's okay and we feel comfortable in our investigation of any concerns, then we're going to head and maybe introduce them to some inmates that have been also filtered through the PC system. For the high profile inmates, they're often targeted for their notoriety of their crimes, particularly in cases involving harm to vulnerable groups like child predators. The what do you call it? For them, it's definitely not solitary confinement based on punitive measures. It's solitary confinement to some extent so we can outright protect them from being hurt or killed, because our job is definitely to have them make it through their trial, make it through their case, and have them go through the justice system and complete their time. We don't want them to have the easy way out. What's your thoughts on that, Joe, that increased security risk?
Yeah, I mean, for celebrities, like I said, like I mentioned before, we're fast forward thinking on these guys because, we're looking at things for their safety, as far as extortion, or like I said, hell, you don't know who's seen or listened to their music or watched their movie that just doesn't like their genre or who they are, or, what they portray in a movie. But, at the same time, I'm sure Los Angeles sees it all the time. I'm sure they have some sort of measure where they have a housing just for, celebrities, where, they're isolated from the general population, but they can still congregate together as a group. So there's still some sort of human interaction between inmates. It just, and then with the high profile guys, it's really about their safety, the facility safety, the staff safety, and preserving the integrity of investigation, such as Richard Allen. This thing is still ongoing. Same with P. Diddy. This thing is still ongoing. So you try to keep them separated from the general population, just for investigative purposes, because of the fact you don't want him or either one of them talking to a whole bunch of people, because everybody that they talk to could be subpoenaed as potential witnesses in a trial. So, you want to keep it simple, stupid. You want to fast forward think and try to keep things as simple as possible without damaging the integrity of their investigations. Where, the celebrity side of it, you're not really worried about the integrity of their DWI or the integrity of their possession charge. It's one of those where, you want to keep them separate just for their safety, because of the fact that, these guys can possibly be escorted, assaulted, because of who they are, just to have that notoriety. Hey, I beat Justin Timberlake's ass, and I was the one that did that. There's a lot of critical thinking that goes into receiving these type of guys, and you have to keep their safety in mind from the population. You also have to keep the safety of the facility in mind too.
Yeah, and guys, I love what you're saying. Now, remember, guys, nothing is a true catch-all. You'll find that people kind of fall into, could fall in either category, could fall into both, but for the most part, where the priority is. So I have for protective custody for celebrity versus high profile. I got for celebrity inmates, this reduces the risk of exploitation, like Joe mentioned. For high profile inmates, it shields them from retaliation or mob mentality. Now, granted, like it could fall into both, but the priority is usually going to be exploitation for the celeb and some type of retaliation for those that commit those high profile crimes. And the dynamic security monitor interactions closely for both groups, so both high profile and celebrity, but focus on different motivations. And that doesn't mean that it's exclusive of the other ones. Just know that status for celebrities and revenge for high profile inmates. So remember that. Yeah, and I think that does matter. I love what Joe mentioned. I said that maybe I don't want my celebrity inmate next to other inmates, because one, they could also have influence, but inmates know they have resources, they have means. They may not want to take them out. They may figure I'm in this for the long game. I could exploit them. Why am I going to look to take this one out? Again, it can go either way, but just a perspective. And then for the high profile ones that done shitty crimes, I could be the unsung hero. I take this guy out and I get connected to the fame as this unsung hero. So it makes sense where the motivations could go, either way. Yes. But for the most part, I like the fact that maybe you could prioritize it. One is for status and exploitation, and the other could be for retaliation or revenge. And then I have, for conflict mediation, I have addressed conflicts proactively, especially for high profile inmates whose cases may evoke strong emotion among other inmates. And for the jails who mostly house the pretrial detainees, but in some rare cases, like in the Richard Allen case, they could step into the prison. Remember, that's ongoing, because as these trials are happening, new things are coming out, and you got to be on point. That's why, for me, universal precaution until this trial's done, they stay isolated, because you can't keep control of everything that could pop out at the last minute that can change the narrative either way. All right, let's see. What? Another crazy thing. What about if you have a high profile inmate where all of a sudden it starts to shift and they start to find out that they are innocent? Maybe it's going that route. All of a sudden, they're putting them in the population and they get taken out. That's not good. That's not good at all. Any thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, that's why, you got to consider all the safety risks and aspects. For me, it's about their safety, the integrity of an ongoing investigation, and, to keep them safe, not only from themselves, but from the population, from being exploited or extorted or assaulted or anything that matter, and to kind of take it one step further, you got to consider the, excuse me, you got to consider what staff you're going to use for both of these. You got to have some pretty professional staff with some good integrity that's going to be able to manage both spectrums of type of offender in the facility, and not be, not associate with them on a human level or a celebrity level, but to keep themselves in a professional level.
I like how you said that. And we're actually going to cover that briefly. I figured this kind of bleeds into what we just discussed, but the increased security demands, for celebrity inmates, their fame can attract fans, unauthorized visitors, or smuggling attempts. Again, it makes sense because, the amount of paparazzi that's coming in, the amount of people that are trying to visit this individual, it's crazy. And then, it also depends on what the inmate may allow as well. You got to protect the inmate as well. Usually they're limited to so many people on their list. So, you don't want to let in people that the inmate did not approve. I'm not saying they have the final approval, but they got the initial approval, if that matters. And then for high-profile inmates, security concerns stem from the nature of their crimes, which might incite outside threats or vigilante action. And obviously that could be even just from the outside. I'm trying to escort him in. You got some guy out in the back trying to snipe him out. Or once he's found guilty, an angry family member who could be right there ready to carry out that justice. But in the prison setting, it's also good to make sure that the person is not housed next to anyone that could be an immediate relative to that family member, because that could happen too, especially in county jails. We have small counties, and next thing you know, you find out that someone's just an immediate relative that was missed. So, I mean, that's another thing that you got to look into. It's just so much, man. And then, Joe, I have just for some solutions, some visitor vetting, for celebrity screen for fans or opportunists. For high-profile inmates, look for potential threats or connections to criminal networks. Because, again, you got to be wary of who's going to be visiting them, especially the high-profile ones. The enhanced surveillance, use technology to monitor movements and detect contraband, tailored to the unique risk of each group. And to access control, assign specialized staff to handle interactions with both groups. That's what you said, Joe, to ensure consistent protocol enforcement. I like what you said, Joe, because you don't want people caught up in the fame.
No, you definitely don't want somebody who's caught up in the fame, because, at some point they're going to make themselves vulnerable to either leaking information or being vulnerable to bringing stuff in for these people. And you definitely have to be careful when it comes to, setting up a visitation list for these guys. We try to strictly keep it to, their attorney, maybe a pastor or a chaplain, somebody of the religious faith, and, immediate family members. We try to keep it as simple as possible, just for that fact, because you don't want anybody being able to network information in or network information out that could either, hinder the security of the institution, or jeopardize, the safety of the public or the safety of the inmate. So keeping it simple is a good thing to use. As far as, staffing, you got to make sure that you're going to have good professional staff with good integrity that's going to be able to handle the task of managing these inmates without letting their fame or high profile status affect the way they do their jobs. Because, face it, let's take a look at what happened with the Casey and the Casey Wright issue. She got compromised, and that's something that does it happen in our environment? Yes, it does. But we have a job to make sure that we're ensuring that we're picking the right staff for the job. There's a lot of forward thinking, when you take somebody in, that the public and the media doesn't realize.
Yeah, and now, guys, the next part I have is exploitation by other inmates. But I'm also going to be fair, because you have people from the outside. Could this happen through staff as well? Yes, it could. For staff that really is not there for that professional role, but rather more greed. They're not professionals, so they don't represent the best of us. They represent their own selfish needs. But I want to mention something before we go into this one, is there's a difference between exploitation and coerced. Exploitation is more subtle, more manipulative. The person may not realize that they're even a victim, and it's more long-term. I also have, it's kind of more about gaining financial or social leverage, where coercion is more about threat, intimidation. It's more overt. The person being threatened is usually aware of it. That's the thing. It's more for immediate reasons as well. So it's like, it could be impulsive, but it's more immediate. If I'm threatening you, I want something now. Long term is, I know when exploitation, sometimes the person may not realize it, but for the someone that's being coerced, they know they're going to feel helpless. They're going to feel trapped. And then this forces someone to commit an act against their will. And this is why I tell people real quick, when they think they know their family members that are behind the wall, they don't, because pressures can change people real quick, especially when they are being coerced. Now, for celebrity inmates, Other inmates may seek to exploit their wealth or influence for financial or social gain. So that's the exploit part. So I think it could be subtle, could be manipulative, and very long term. For high profile inmates, they may face extortion, or they may be coerced, they may be threatened, and it's a little bit different now. So again, Joe, you got one that's very subtle, but more long term, because they know that this person has the resources to let me get a relationship with this person, let me build a bond, let me manipulate a closeness, and then I can drain them of their blood. Pretty much, I can drain them. Where the other thing is, this person knows they're going to be a target. This person's a child predator. They're vulnerable. I don't need to do this long term. I could just go at them every day with what I need, and then that person that's being coerced or being threatened will in the long term start feeling helpless. And that's where the facility also has to provide, as I said, protective custody on both sides, because, one, for the person that's being exploited, you may not know what's happening. So that's where we have to step up and say, yo, we just found that you're giving his family money. Why is that? That's why investigators, we don't allow for those things to occur. They don't allow for money to be exchanged, lending and borrowing, because there could be a reason why it could be exploitation. So that's why we sweat those little rules, because of the wolf that could be behind it. And then for the other side, for the coercion, of course, if the guy's weaker or the female's weaker, and it's like, hey, and they've done this crime, you're going to expect them to be targeted for, hey, you got to give me this, or if you don't give me it, then I'm going to get at you. Because usually that's what's going to happen. What's going to happen is they're going to milk this person for all they can until they can't do it, and then they take them out. But what's your thoughts on that, Joe? Exploitation versus coercion, I guess.
Yeah, exploitation definitely leans towards the celebrity status, where coercion relates to the high profile. And for the exploitation, it may not be one of those scenarios that you see in the Shawshank or any of these prison movies where a celebrity person comes to jail and it's automatically, hey, you pay me and I'll protect your way around this yard. It could be something as simple as, hey man, I'll do this for you if you hook me up with a good attorney. He may be exploiting this guy for just simple things for financial gain on his part, because maybe he's stuck with a shitty state attorney or a court appointed attorney, and here comes a celebrity with an entourage of attorneys. He may be trying to get caught up in just trying to get a high price attorney that can actually reduce his time or get him out as well. So whereas the high profile is usually direct, it's meaningful to them, because they're either exploiting them, they're not exploiting them, they're coercing them, because of the fact that their crime is such a high profile. They're looking at the fact that they may want to assault him, they may want to use him. I'm not going to say how, but there's to me it's exploitation is more towards the celebrity side, because there's a financial means and gains, whereas coercion is more of an immediate threat because there's physical demands associated with it.
Yeah, and in the long-term aspect of it all, like
absolutely.
I think for the celebrities, it makes sense to exploit a little bit, because they may have resources on the longer term, where someone who's just high profile for their crime may not. So I want to get what I can immediately until they can't anymore. And eventually everybody gets drained anyway. But you do have some high profile inmates that do come from serious means, and it could be for them as well. They could get exploited first, and then maybe coerced when they don't have nothing left, and then they get taken out. And guys, we learn in the process too, because there have been times when, we've done other shows where we may say exploit could be the same thing as coercion, but really it's not. I guess it's really depending on the perspective of who they're going after, and the tactic that's used. So it's good to understand that there are different tactics. Still the end result is taking. So it makes sense that you think the one word could catch it all. But if you think about the difference between exploiting a celebrity who long-term and threatening a high-profile inmate, because that they're coming in and they're already vulnerable. It's going to be hard, maybe to some extent, to threaten a P. Diddy. It could be hard at first. He's a person of many means, and has status amongst his what he's done. He's developed status, could still be respected, my Benny. So you may not want to go in and think that you could threaten him right away. It could be, let me get close. He's going to need me. He's vulnerable to that sense. He's alone. So let me play the card. And that's why we as in corrections, like, yeah, even that relationship looks good. It's too soon. It's too soon.
Yeah.
This guy's got to know a little bit about the prison setting. And that's what I have as my solution. So I have controlled interactions, limit exposure to the general population when risks are high. So not solitary, but in isolation, like protective custody makes sense. Close monitoring, watch for unusual alliances, financial transactions, or behavioral changes, which we talked about. And inmate education. This is good. Teach high-profile and celebrity inmates how to navigate prison dynamics safely. I don't think that's done, but maybe it should be done. I mean, let people know when they're coming in, hey, just want to let you know, this ain't the environment like you have on the outside. And these are some of the things you should be aware of. And these are some of the actions that you can take. And it would be interesting if we were to if we as staff introduced them to that dynamic first before they went ahead and got introduced to that by a senior inmate or an inmate, because I think that, and Joe, maybe you would agree, whoever sets that initial impression first could hold weight. I'm not saying it's 100% going to last long, but like if I went into the facility and Joe was my lieutenant, he came in, was respectful to me, and right off the bat taught me how I need to be, how I shouldn't be, and I respected Joe, and Joe was my first initial interaction. That could be my foundation. Now, any type of interaction after that, if it requires me to shift, I may not want to, because Joe, I had a good rapport with Joe when he came in, and there's no reason for me not to trust Joe. So that foundation that I have could help me when later on people try to introduce another foundation, because that means I would have to shift one, and I may not be willing to do that. But I think we should take more advantage of those initial interactions, create the strong foundation. What's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Especially when it comes to, celebrities coming in, you definitely want to kind of give them the heads up, especially if they're naive to, the actual correctional setting. Let them know ahead of time, hey, this is not what you see on TV. This is what you need to be aware of, because of who you are. You could be exploited for your financial means. You could be exploited for, your celebrity status. There's a ton of things that you can kind of give them a heads up for. And I think that's something that should be done. I think there should be, especially for the celebrities, because a vast majority of them are one-offs, when it comes to coming to jail. And of course you have, some of them that have been through the system several times for the same things, whether it's DWI or possession or, drug abuse or, but I really do think that they need to be made aware ahead of time, what they could be looking at, as far as exploitation, where, the high profile inmates, chances are they've probably done time at some point. So they probably already know the correctional system. They know what the general population has to offer. They pretty much know how to navigate that. Whereas your celebrities, especially your first timers, don't have a clue as to how to navigate and what to expect and what to look out for.
Yeah, I agree. And guys, think about this before we go on to the next one. That initial interaction is such a tool that I hope we don't just throw away. Like whether, maybe you can have that initial interaction on intake or orientation, or, you don't want to leave it, let's say, to the cellmate or the inmates on the unit. But I also want to say, I've seen that a little off topic, but real quick, I've seen us do that with rookies too, where it's like, if you have any questions, this is the senior inmate, they run the unit. So you can ask them any questions. Like, what are you talking about? Why am I going to go to them when I can go to you? Why are you tossing me off already? Build a bond with me. So my foundation comes from a good source. I don't squander that initial interaction. So the next one I got, we're moving down the list pretty good, is risk of manipulation. So for celebrity inmates, now guys, this is different now. This is more about influence that they can have. So now we're going to look at it from another perspective. So for celebrity inmates, they may use charm, flattery, or their public image to manipulate staff or inmates, and that's what we're always concerned with. And then you have the high-profile inmate. They may use intimidation or emotional appeals to gain special treatment or sympathy. So a bit different in their game, but with that said, it's good to know that they also could play a game as well. I mean, would that make sense, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. They have the ability to manipulate the staff just as much as the staff and the general population can manipulate them. And it may be for just basic needs, special foods or extra mattress or whatever the case is. There's definitely a risk of a celebrity status trying to be manipulated, because of who they are. With gains of themselves as just as much as anybody else.
Yeah, and I got staff training. I mean, I have the books on it. Inmate Manipulation Decoded, Breaking Boundaries. So you want to teach staff to recognize manipulation tactics tailored to each group, or tailored from each group, whatever they could, however they whatever method each group uses. And when I say group, I mean the high profile versus celebrity. Professional boundaries, so you enforce clear, documented boundaries in all interactions. I mean, when they first come in, I know, like, we tell officers to, at the very beginning, sweat everything, and then you can always lead through discretion later on, but you want to make sure that you set the template. But sometimes when a celebrity comes in, you may have to reset yourself. Or when a new inmate comes in, sometimes you have to reset yourself and create those boundaries all over again to those new inmates that come in. So it's great when the other inmates know what you're about, but a new inmate coming in doesn't. So if a celebrity inmate tries to come in, or a high-profile inmate tries to come in and tries to, maybe maneuver something, I think you should go back to old school first-day rookie and write up that interaction and let the inmate know you're not tolerating it, but also when you write it, you're documenting it. So you're letting the facility know, you're letting your peers know that, hey, this guy came in day one and already tried this. So I know, like, again, you may be more senior. It's like, oh, I can handle it. Yeah, but I think we should document the effort, because sometimes I get you can handle it. No one's questioning that, but documenting the effort could show your staff and your peers, hey, this guy's coming in strong. Yeah. What's your thoughts on that, Joe? You ever go back to rookie mode?
Oh yeah. Still do to this day, and sometimes you got to have that one professional rogue voice that kind of tells them right off the bat, hey, you're in my facility. As long as you're abiding by the rules, your cell's clean, your cell's tidy, your bed's made, you wear your clothes properly and do what you're supposed to do, we're not going to have any problems. If you come outside of them boundaries, we're going to have issues. And then you kind of lace them up as since you're here, this is what you can be exposed to. This is what you have a chance of seeing and being manipulated by. It's always important to set that tone. It doesn't matter if they're a celebrity or first time inmate from, wherever. You have to set that tone. You have to get that. You got to get that small shit out of the way and let them know that, yes, I appreciate the fact that you're a celebrity, but you're now an inmate in my facility. And, you're going to be expected to abide by everything else that everybody else goes by, and if they try to come in strong after the fact, you don't get to have that talk, put it in their file. Let the other staff know that this guy can be manipulative, for any kind of personal gains, whether it's, like I said, it could be an extra mattress. It could be a specialized foods, extra tray, the small stuff. It's always, and I've said it before, if you sweat the small stuff, you won't have to worry about the big stuff.
And guys, I want to add, some people may ask, can you rotate staff out so it limits the chance for undue familiarity? I mean, you could, but not all. Some states prefer consistency, and they do allow for officers to bid on units, and we expect the officer to be professional and basically don't get complacent within the routine. And that's up to them when they enforce the boundaries every day. But with that said, it does make sense to try to rotate them out because relationships could develop. But I do want consistency. So I would just have to go back to the officer and say, hey, always enforce those boundaries. And maybe there are some times where if I, have an officer in a unit too long, I would like to see them write up something a little bit, just to make sure that I have that authority with that officer. Because you're right. I mean, on the surface, you're like, oh, this unit is running smooth. So maybe that's why there's not a lot of charges coming from it. Or on the adverse of that, it could be the officers just become very complacent, whether it's through the relationships or just their authority. So it's good to kind of see a little bit more engagement once in a while. Maybe the one day I was willing to let it slide, which, hey, okay, you know what, Joe, I know you don't do this all the time, but don't do it again. But the next time I write it, I mean, it's good to just make sure that the officer is engaged, and sometimes write-ups could show that, even if they're minor write-ups, but that's still something that is definitely worth looking into. So I wanted to stay in line with that, Joe, and I also wanted to put allegations of specialized treatment. So the challenge is here that celebrity inmates, their fame often leads to perceptions of preferential treatment, whether in housing, leniency, or access to privileges. And then for high-profile inmates, this is the opposite now. Public's attention on their crime or trials can lead to scrutiny of their treatment, with assumptions of either favoritism or harshness. So it goes either way. But this matters, Joe, because now this matters. Do I have the right officers on these posts, both on either extreme, right? I don't want an officer to be so involved personally, like, well, I'm a father and I can't picture someone doing that to my kid, so I treat this inmate like shit when that's not their job, or someone that's so enamored by the fame that the moment the inmate comes in, you got the officer asking for their autograph.
Yeah, you're gonna have those, and it's a lesser of two evils, really. As far as the staff goes, you want to rotate the staff so this guy doesn't get any kind of familiarity with anybody. Yeah, and that kind of makes sense. But on the same token, and we got to think about it too, nationwide. Not everybody has the staff to rotate out like that. And we also have to face the fact that, we have some staff that still have some learning to do, and really isn't ready for this challenge yet. Whereas, having somebody with consistency, a long-term veteran that can run that area without issues, without, compromising his integrity or professionalism, is a good thing as well. But you also run the chance of, the starstruck and the awe and everything that comes with the celebrity or high profile, inmates, and as far as the special treatments, that, the media and the public need to understand that just because they're celebrity doesn't mean that they don't have issues. Sometimes they're going to come to us with medical issues that spill over from the outside, especially when it comes to drug and alcohol abuse. They're going to be things that we have to do for them to keep them from becoming physically ill. And it's not a special treatment. It's something that we do for everybody. It just doesn't pertain to the celebrity or the high profile inmate. When they come in, they may have some sort of religious preference, if they're practicing, being a Muslim or being Jewish, or, we have to look at aspects of things that we would do for everybody with these kind of preferences. It just doesn't pertain to them just because they're celebrity. We do it on a daily basis. You guys are just hearing about it in the media because, it just happens to be that celebrity that's the one that's receiving these services.
Yeah, and Joe, that's what I actually have. I have transparency, so document all decisions related to housing, privileges, and interactions to demonstrate fairness, which we just discussed. Consistency, apply facility policies equally to all inmates while addressing legitimate security concerns. And the last one, for communication, explain security related decisions, so isolation, clearly to staff, inmates, and when appropriate, the public. And I think that's where we fail when it comes to really equating isolation to solitary confinement. And then the people that are in these media positions, they wind up, when they go to explain it, they still use the term solitary confinement. Guys, it connects too much to punitive. And I will say one other thing, because this is where the extremes come in. Like, okay, well, if you put him in generalized population, these are the risks. So if something happens to him, you're at fault. If you put him in isolation or solitary, but let's just keep it what it's isolation, there's likelihood that they can decompensate or wind up hurting themselves. So now if something happens at that point, you're going to be held liable. Yeah, but I just want to mention something, guys, and this is not to be cold, but hear me out. The devil you know versus the devil you don't know. You know, you put him in GP. There's so many variables in play that it's hard for us to figure out where the exact threat is going to be. You know, so having said that, it's just not an option for us. It's not going to be an option. And in our profession, we have to make a choice. We can't sit in the middle and everybody gives us these impossibilities of these decisions that we have to make, but we have to make one. It is what it is. So the lesser of two evils is the isolation, because we can mitigate. We have mental health professionals. We have trained officers. We have people that can maintain vigilance. So if the person does pose a threat to themselves, which could happen, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, we can manage it. We can try to work them through the impulse with mental health professionals so we can get them where they need to be. But again, that's the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. So again, there's no choice that's going to be ideal. But if it comes to where we feel that the greater control lies, it's not going to lie in putting them in GP. It's going to eventually go towards isolation. Would you agree with that, Joe? The devil you know versus the devil you don't?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the media and the public have to understand that, we're not only in charge of the facility, the safety of the staff, we're also in charge of the safety of the inmate population. And we're also in charge of that celebrity or high profile inmates safety. If we put them in general population and God forbid something happens to them, we're liable for it because, we could have prevented that. It's a lesser of two evils regardless, either way. It's a devil when we take it on. It's a devil when we make the decisions. We have to take into account, the inmates, physical health, mental health, all at the same token. We're definitely going to protect their physical health because we're going to keep them isolated, not really, let me say separated, administratively separated from the population because of the fact that, again, we don't know where the threat's coming from. The threat could be coming from, any of these 2,000 other inmates that we have here in population. And we can't take that risk. We absolutely cannot take that risk. Therefore we keep them administratively separated from the population. And if for some reason, they're going through some sort of medical or mental crisis, we can actually address it better with them being separated from the general population than we could if they were in the population. It's much easier for us to address. It's much, time-wise, constraint-wise, and direct-wise. It's easier for us to address. Not all of them are going to decompensate, but, some of them go through the broad of emotions. We can, at any point in time and at any direct point in time, we can have somebody from medical, we can have somebody from mental health, or we can have somebody from chaplaincy there to talk them through it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's what the public doesn't know. Guys, I would love to put this out there if anybody's watching it. Maybe I'll talk with a production company soon. I think we really need to get our eyes into those solitary confinement areas, or I say isolation, so we can look at protective custody units, restorative housing units, put some cameras in it. And I want you guys to see the dedicated work that happens behind those walls. Now, granted, once you put the cameras on, you're probably going to get a different type of inmate than staff would every day. So you can either do it undercover with body-worn cameras, or if you go in, expect that you're going to have inmates that may see the cameras and either act up extreme, or they could be like angels. But the one thing that doesn't change, and I know this for a fact, is the work that gets done behind the wall, whether cameras are on or not. All right. So I'm going to stand up for my staff on that because I know that for a fact. Every time we have people coming into the facility, we just tell our staff, hey guys, do your routine. We don't call everybody in. We don't tell them to just do your everyday job. That's all we want. Okay, so for the next one, Joe, I got a few more. Then we could these are good ones. I got the psychological and emotional challenges. So for this, I got for celebrity inmates, we're talking about the downfall, the fall from grace. So they struggle with the dramatic shift from fame to incarceration, often leading to depression or anxiety. And again, that's what the media is interested in. So even if the inmate starts to try to understand this fall from grace, they start to kind of get adjusted to it, the media throws more stuff out, and if they're happening to watch it, all of a sudden they're being flooded with it and they can't escape it. So even if we have some level of control in helping the inmate manage this fall from grace, the media, they just love this. So they'll be putting stuff out there, whether it's through the news, the TV, or whether it's through whatever it is, newspapers or magazines, and all this good hard work that we're providing to help this inmate get through it. And they're just, they may say, oh, and now we can't be with his family around the holidays, or now we can't live this life. And it's like, oh, we just helped them through it. What are you doing? Now you add a caveat, like we help them get through, like he may not be able to see his family all the time, but now it's around Christmas holidays, and you put a random special on the first time this celebrity is going to be locked up during Christmas, where he can't see his family, can't see anybody. And now we're like, oh, wait a second, man, we just got him through it. Now you're using the holidays, and now it's making it a lot worse. Now we got to put him back, possibly on constant watch. And then for high-profile inmates, they face stress from isolation, guilt, or public hatred due to their crimes. And it's funny with this, because I think that even with the Richard Allen thing, I do think he did it. And I think the mental health breakdown was, and I could be wrong, that when in his time alone, if he did have a mental health breakdown, he wasn't playing the system, it could have been because of the guilt he felt for what he did. That could have manifested its way outside. But again, Joe, so celebrities, it's the dramatic shift from grace, living the great life, to now where you're at. And for high profile inmates, it's the stress from isolation, guilt, or just the hatred due to their crime. Remember, even Richard Allen said when they thought it was him, and it's making it known, he goes, what am I supposed? I can't go back anyway because people think it's me. So there is that hatred that could also affect them. Like, even if I'm found not guilty, I'm still going to be judged as if I did. But that could be extremely challenging, especially because if the case is ongoing, media will just throw stuff up for ratings. They don't care how we have to manage it behind the system. And sometimes, guys, and I don't see this being done, that should be noted in our transparent efforts. Is, hey, we were doing good, but then this recent story came out and hit us sideways. We weren't expecting it, and now we had to shift what we were doing. So now when the media is coming, it's like, oh, so many things changed. Yeah, because of you. Because of what you just put out there in the news that everybody has access to now.
Yeah, I mean, for celebrities, I like to say it's reality setting in, and for the high profile inmates, it's finality setting in. For the celebrities, it's the wake up call. Shit, I'm actually here. Regardless of who I am, I'm actually here, and this is real. This is happening. Whereas for the high profile, finality setting in. I'm incarcerated. I can't do what I was doing anymore. I have no one to reach out to. I have nothing to gain at this point. I have nowhere to go, nothing to, actually put my hands on. That's why I try to associate it with, reality versus finality. And it could absolutely cause psychological, emotional challenges on both ends of the spectrum, because, reality, like I just said, oh shit, I'm here. This is happening. This is actually happening. I can't just, call up who I want to call up and make this go away. Whereas, the high profile inmate, is going through the psychological, emotional changes, because now he's been the stop has been put to whatever crimes he was committing, and he can't do it no more. So the finality is this is where it ends. This is where the road stops. And, because he can't do what he was doing, that'll start the psychological, emotional and challenges as with them as well, because they're no longer in control. They're not the ones in control anymore on either side of the spectrum. They're not in control of what's taking place. They just have to go with what's in front of them at the time and follow the same procedures.
I like that, Joe, because you said a lot of good points there. I think even with the Richard Allen situation, when he made the confessions, even though he wound up pulling it back later on, that was his effort to control the narrative, because he knew that this was going to be his fate. And then eventually, whatever it came out through the discovery shifted his perspective. But right, that effort to control the narrative matters. And I want to mention something. If you're a defense attorney, man, and you start selling them this bridge, you're going to get them off, and you don't. There's another fall from grace.
Yep.
There's another one, that you got to prepare for. So for this, I got mental health resources, provide access to trained therapists experienced in handling public figures or notorious offenders, which we do. Regular check-ins, conduct frequent wellness assessments to identify and address mental health issues early. And by the way, guys, when they're in these isolated units, they are seen daily. So they are, these efforts to check in are being documented, especially from the mental health professionals that have to go into those close custody units every day, because those inmates in close custody units may not have access to request help. So what we do is we deliver them. And then if they need them, they need them. If they don't, they don't. And then the structured routine, offer programs to promote engagement and emotional stability. Now that the structured routine, it may not be groups, but again, the structured routine is we're visiting those units every day. So we do try to keep the inmate engaged in things that keep them out of their cell, as long as they're not problematic. We also have to make sure that that they're not a risk to staff if we do take them out. Some high profile inmates could be. Some celebrity status inmates could be. With that said, but you do want to develop them in a routine. I think that's something, to be honest with you, that if ever, the media requests, that's something that I don't see an issue with bringing that out to let the public know. Well, when he got here, he is doing these daily activities, because think about it. If you don't tell them that they're doing this routine, that automatically they're going to think he's stuck in a hole all day, pissing out the window and all this other shit, So it's like, what? I'm good with saying that's not happening. So let me tell you what he does every day. He wakes up, gets dressed, has breakfast, has rec time. Right now he's working on his case. So a big portion of his day, still keeping his mind engaged, is on his case. Then, lunch, dinner, whatever, their TV's on the day room, so you get to watch some TV. Mental health is visiting him daily. And I think that's good to let people know how busy and by minute his day or their days are planned out. Because if you don't say that, then automatically they think that he's in the cell all day and never doing anything. So I believe the transparency with the routine matters in regards to getting people off that idea that they're just in the dark all day. Like, it's funny when they were talking about Richard Allen and, solitary confinement destroyed him. Yeah, but in that short time, 15 months, whatever it was, he made 700 phone calls to his family, saw mental health so many times, working on his case so many times. So he had a routine that didn't keep him in his cell. So, I think that should have been explored a little more when they say, well, he was really? So how did he make these 700 phone calls? Right. How do you manage to get that off? I don't think I even get 700 phone calls in a matter of a year. But anything on that, Joe, before we get to the next one?
Yeah, I mean, some sort of transparency into their daily routines without divulging, any kind of security issues I think it's important, because, and you're right, because otherwise the media will portray this guy being in a concrete cell, pissing in a drain in the floor, being treated, like the scum of society, or, and it's not the case. These guys have access to more than we do on a daily basis, and I think it's important for the public and the media to understand that they do have a routine that and things that they have access to, whether it be psychological, emotional, religious, they are afforded the same opportunities that every other inmate are. And they are, they have better access to things than we do in some cases.
Yeah. Now for this one here, let me get myself back on. For the power dynamic within the facility, for celebrity inmates, I wrote their presence can create jealousy or disrupt the established social order, which, remember, they're coming in with celebrity status. So they're coming in with influence 100%. Now, you have those that are highly suggestible that will follow them blindly. So we got to be wary of that. But you also have those that can see that that's celebrity status could jeopardize their status. And they may want to take that person out. So again, that definitely does shift in the power dynamic. A person with a high celebrity status could easily come in and, again, resource and means. If that person has resource and means, they have status in that world. So I could definitely see a celebrity inmate coming in and people getting jealous, of that status or wanting to take them out because you're a threat to my status. As for high profile inmates, I took note that their notoriety can shift alliances or incite tension among inmates. So sometimes you could have high profile inmates that lead groups, that lead gangs. And all of a sudden, when they come in, alliances could shift because that person runs the show. I've seen it. I've seen, Latin Kings come from Illinois, from Chicago. And all of a sudden, their respect in our facility could shift from, we may have New York Latin Kings, and they may think they're running the show, but then you get a Chicago-based Latin King coming in there, and that dynamic all shifts. Or you can get, we have these hybrid bloods, so you can get whatever set, maybe repping strong, and all of a sudden a West Coast blood comes in, and they may have that rep because you can't question the fact that they come from the West Coast, and they could be from one of the founding sets. So technically, they may have a bit of a hierarchy. And it could shift the dynamic. So it's something to be aware of. And high profile could be inmates that have status in the gang world. And then also tension we mentioned, because you have inmates that, if you put me next to a child killer, and let's say I belong to a group, that group may say, hey, you got to take him out. Does that happen? It does. But what people may not realize is that inmate may not want to take anybody out because maybe they're a short timer. So they may go to custody and say, hey, listen, I need to be moved, because if you don't move me, I'm going to hurt this guy. Now, of course, what staff does, what's the right thing to do is, because that could happen all day. What inmates try to manipulate single cell is that I still write the inmate up for a threatening charge, and they serve their time in lock. But obviously, I'm not going to put him next to that inmate. But it's not a free for all, because then any inmate can come up and say, hey, you don't put me next. I'm going to hurt this guy. No, you're still responsible for it. So I'm going to write you up for the threat you just made. Maybe you won't be with this inmate. But you're definitely going to do some time in lock for making the threat. This way you keep things balanced, because if not, yes, maybe there could be some pressure for the person to do it, but there are also going to be people wanting a single cell that don't want to be housed with anybody. So you got to kind of monitor the game, if that makes sense.
And that really sucks too, because there's a lot of stuff that you gotta focus on when it comes to that, because if in that instance, the guy comes to you and says, hey, if you don't move me, I'm going to have to hurt this guy. When you move him, place him in lock, now he's in lockup, and he may have a target on his back because he can be considered a catch out, so now you have two instances of security issues and physical issues that you have to be aware of versus one. If the media and the public understood what we have to go through on a daily basis and decide on, especially when it comes to the personal safety of either a celebrity or a high profile inmate, or just a general inmate. Just talking about gangs in general, we have to proceed with caution when we make decisions on what we're going to do, because it's not an easy aspect to cover, because you make one decision that may turn into two more problems. So there's never really a right answer. There's just a temporary measure for us to alleviate the problems when it comes to high profile inmates, and they could very well have alliances, and that could ultimately, compromise the security of your facility. If you got one person that brings, three groups of people together, and you're already short staffed, man, it could be a problem. It could be a problem that it could be a problem for everybody. It's not an easy thing to cope with at times. Whereas the celebrity status, they may unite just because of who they are, and not necessarily an immediate threat, but somewhere down the line it's going to become a security threat, because if they grab a bunch of people with alliance to him, he's basically started his own little cult within the facility too, and it's manipulation tactics start, and it's a headache. It's a headache on a good day.
You're right, Joe. Like, I mean, you could have people that are caught up. I mean, feds will get this more, but you never know. RICO charges where you're getting the leader, you're getting organized crime. So when that person comes in, they definitely come in with status. The celebrity will just get the status from their infamy. I'm sorry, from their infamy, from being just famous. But the ones I think are the bigger concern here are the high profile inmates that come in because they're infamous. Yep. You know, because they're caught up in whatever the charges. And Joe, you made a good point about the damned if you do, damned if you don't. So if the inmate, let's say, comes up, usually when they say I'm going to kill this or I can't be living with this guy or else I'm going to have to kill him. It's conditional. Usually the gang will kind of say you can't live with this guy. So you got to either take him out or find another cellmate. I can't have you living with a pedophile or I can't have you living, and guys, no disrespect, it could be I can't have you living with a homosexual. Yeah. You know, some gangs are very strict on no homosexuality. So they may find out that the person is housed with a homosexual. They may say you can't house with them. You may see that among the Muslim religion. They don't want one of their members housed with someone who could be seen as homosexual. So they may say, you basically prove your loyalty. So either you get out of being housed with them or take them out. So usually there's the option. So then the person comes in and says, if you keep me here, I'm going to kill him. And then the facility now, unfortunately, does have to act, but you don't want to open up that Pandora's box where you just move them and allow for that window to be open for anybody to say that. So I like what you said. It was a good point. I think that when they go to lock, I don't know if they're going to be targeted by the gang so much, but it does make it does make something that you said that should be monitored, though, just in case. But usually I believe they're given the option to either or. But what about if it is something that's directed towards them? Take them out. So now this is your opportunity to take them out. I want you to go in PC, take them out. Manipulate your way in a PC and take. So maybe there is a directive. The person finds their way in their cell and they could be given a directive to kill them. Now, if they go and tell staff, hey, I don't want to kill them because I'm being told by the gang to kill them, that's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
That's a investigative thing where that person may not go directly to lock. That person's going to get picked up by the investigative division, maybe put in PC, and we're going to discover the threat. So that was good. That was good to bring that dynamic up. I got two more. So the next one I have is public perception of their treatment. Oh, wait, before we do that, for the last one, for the last one, the solutions we just discussed, but just to tell you is segregation when necessary, temporarily isolate disruptive inmates to stabilize conflicts. We mentioned that. Monitoring influences. That's why you need to keep them isolated at first to see what they're about, but track shifts in alliances or behaviors caused by the inmate's presence. That's why you introduce them and slowly, especially at the prison side, if you're going to bring them to GP and you're concerned that they do have greater influence, you're not going to put them right in the general population. That could put odds with the officers that got to run that unit. Let's see what this person's about. Let's try to get an understanding, work with the investigative division, work with staff, and it's very controlled. And then the last thing, I got quick intervention, address power struggles early to maintain control. All right, so kind of said that. Public perception of their treatment. So for celebrity inmates, we kind of touched on this, but public perception may demand harsher treatment due to their status or privilege. And high-profile inmates, public attention often focuses on whether justice is being appropriately served. For the latter, I want to mention something before I go to you, Joe. For the latter, how many times do I hear when we go on these true crime podcasts that you shouldn't be giving them anything? And it's like, hey, guys, first off, that's not our job. Second thing is, if we don't give them nothing, then we have no way to control them. So there's so many, one is the humane aspect, but one is also, hey, guys, what we're giving them is control, giving staff control. Why has he got a TV? So staff can take it away. No, but it's the truth. Why are they giving stuff to read? So staff can take it away. Why are they giving phone calls? So staff can take it away. Outside of the humane, all these things, well, not the TV, but the phone, visits. I mean, these all fall within rights. Don't get me wrong. But having said that, there are things that they also get that are called privileges that allow staff to control them because, again, why do they get it? So staff could take it away. And as for celebrity inmates, as I said, public perception may demand harsher treatment due to their status or privilege. Hey, what's your thoughts on both of that, Joe?
Yeah, and I agree. There's things that we have to give them by law. Of course, we got to feed them, we got to shower them, we got to give them clothes, change the clothes. We got them afford them access to a law library. We got to afford them access to mental health, religion. These are basic concepts that we afford everybody on a daily basis. Then there's privileges. Commissary, TV, day room, recreation. They're things. Tablets, telephone privileges. These are things that we afford everybody who behaves appropriately, and these are things that we can take away when they don't behave appropriately. But the public's perception of they ought to be just tossed in a hole and throw away the key. It's not that simple, folks. It's not that simple. We have to treat them. We have to treat them humanely, regardless of who they are and what they've done. We are there's something that we have to by law do, and we have to afford them the same things that everybody else gets. Now, he gets TV. He has a TV in his cell. He gets to come out and make telephone calls. He gets to come out for an hour or 2 hours a day and watch and go to recreation. These are things that if he chooses not to follow policies and procedures, these are things that we can take away in the disciplinary sanctions until such time as he can follow the policies and procedures. But, the public perception of we just toss somebody in a hole because of who they are and what they've done, that's something that we don't do.
Yeah, this kind of falls into the category we had before about specialized treatment. So again, policy consistency, follow standard operating procedures to demonstrate fairness and avoid bias, clear communication, share non-sensitive details to manage public expectation, like the routine, and then avoid overcorrection. Ensure treatment is balanced and not influenced by external pressure.
I think one of the biggest ones is the medical treatment. The public is why the hell are we paying this money for their medicines? Why are we paying? Us as taxpayers have to pay it because we fucking have to. Yeah. If they come in diabetic, we have to afford them their insulin shots
because they can't get it elsewhere.
It's not like we have a Walgreens inside the penitentiary, and that's something that the public needs to think about. If it was your son, your daughter, and they came in with medical ailments, with medications that they have to take, you'd want to ensure that they were continuing to take them too.
Yeah, and this last one, I don't know. I put it in there, but risk of escape or harm, and it's more for the attention that could be brought to the facility. So escape attempts could lead to significant media coverage and embarrassment for the facility. Same with risk of external threats or targeted harm due to their notoriety. So obviously, escape preventions like increased surveillance and conduct regular searches. Threat assessment, collaborate with intelligence units to identify and mitigate potential risks, especially if you're trying to especially at the prison side, when you may be trying to introduce them to a GP setting, where if you want to talk about Richard Allen, he wasn't at that point going to go to a GP setting because he was still pre-trial. But now that he's sentenced, there could be efforts to do that eventually. But I would wait a little bit because you got the appeals. You got people now arguing his innocence, and then people aggressively arguing his guilt. Well, that's the bigger concern. And then the emergency drills, train staff to handle security breaches to escape attempts effectively. All right, so Joe, we've been covering a lot of real quick solutions, in the process of discussing what the concerns are. But I have 4 things I want to just go over at you real quick. I'll read it real quick, and then maybe we could just elaborate on this real quick. But strategies for overall success, I have professionalism. So I have trained staff to treat celebrity and high-profile inmates with the same professionalism as others, which we said multiple times, whether it's through policy, procedure, consistency, whatever. Documentation, maintain detailed records of all decisions and incidences to protect against legal or reputational challenges. And when I say all decisions, guys, we know at this point, through our experience, what's going to be scrutinized. I mean, not everything, but we know for the most part, these are the routine things that they could attack. And yes, once in a while, it could be something so crazy. But for the most part, I think for these celebrity inmates and stuff like that, we should be documenting their daily routine, at least at the very beginning, just to set momentum to let people know, because we know we're going to have to answer to the public more than we would for the generalized population. But with that said, it should be no different than what we're providing the generalized population. So, if someone said, well, what are they doing every day? You know what? I may not know so much about, P. Diddy, let's say, but I'll know that every day this is what we should be offering him. Every day this is what they should be doing. And then I just got to pretty much make a phone call and verify that that's happening. But again, just kind of the routine, document it at least till you get that momentum going where people get bored of it. Like, how many times you're going to discuss this now? Okay, so just keep on doing it until they get bored, I guess, where it no longer becomes top story. Then I have, I think this mattered with Richard Allen, but also matters with us, is interagency collaboration. Work with law enforcement, mental health professionals, and media teams to manage challenges holistically. So again, maybe law enforcement, because you got a celebrity inmate. How can you help us with maintaining control of the outside of the building or efforts to come in? Mental health, if you have a good, you're working with a good mental health vendor, or you yourself state mental health, are we, doing our rounds, or are we checking on the inmate right now while they're in isolation, etc. And then the last thing I got, and I think this matters the most, is flexibility. Adapt strategies based on specific behaviors and risks posed by each inmate. And I want to mention something here. This is what corrections excels at, or what we should excel at. We adapt and adjust to the situations that come there. We have our strategies and we have our plans, but we're not paid just to blindly follow policy and procedure. We're paid to make adjustments when needed, to keep the momentum going in our direction, and just, we're decision makers. But what's your thoughts on that, Joe? Professionalism,
Oh yeah, I mean, professionalism to me would be professionalism, documentation, communication, and training. We have to be, like you said, we're decision makers. Sometimes it's momentarily, sometimes it's daily. And we have to be prepared to make those decisions. It may not be one that everybody likes, but unfortunately it's a necessary evil to protect the integrity of, whatever's coming our way. Whether it's the integrity of investigation for a high profile inmate, and I think communication and, like you said, interagency collaboration is a must, because, that investigations may still be ongoing. So we have to do what we can to kind of preserve that. So, like I said, everybody that this guy talks to could be subpoenaed on the state or subpoenaed on the stand, and could muddy the waters and hinder investigations and hinder prosecution. So that's something we got to be mindful of, and documentation, I can't stress it enough. Cover your ass, because, God forbid that this guy should start declining physically. And the media portrays him as being, just horribly fucking treated. We're starving them to death. We're doing this, we're doing that. And we have the documentation to show that this guy's on a hunger strike. After 3 meals, that he refused 3 meals and wasn't observed eating in any commissary. He was taking a medical on a daily basis, and monitored and observed and treated. And, there's a host of things that go on inside the walls that the public has no clue that we deal with on a daily basis. The professionalism side, I can't even stress professionalism side enough. Even all the way up to the public information office, that filters all the way down to the frontline staff. You have to be professional in what you do. You can't let somebody take you out of their prescribed role because of who they are, or their fame and fortune. I can't stress it enough. And documentation. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. This is something that we can use, to cover our bases in case something, happens with this inmate, and we can kind of tell the story. Well, this has been going on for a while. On this date, this is what happened. On this date, this is what we did. On this date, medical came in. On this date, mental health came in. We got to have a document. I can't stress documentation enough.
I agree. And Joe, you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, I mean, I hope this kind of gives the public and the media, a better insight as to, things that the media can say and do that can affect our operations. They got to realize that, just the people sitting in their homes watching TV are not the only ones watching their broadcast. You have thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of inmates nationwide that are watching the same broadcast on their dayroom TV or on TV in their cell. So you have to be mindful of what you say. Us as an agency, we have to be mindful of what we say and what we give to the media that can be construed or portrayed wrong. We want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to protect the humanity of the person that we have incarcerated. We want to make sure that we're protecting the safety and the security of our institutions. And we need to make sure that, what we portray out there is going to keep everybody in general safe.
I agree. And guys, the reason why I wanted to have this dialogue and the reason why we covered it from different perspective is we've covered it before, but I thought that this was actually a good perspective for staff who are doing it right now. I think that noting the difference between high profile and celebrity, knowing nothing falls 100% perfectly in any one of these categories, but I think it's a good mindset to have when initially assessing what the concerns are. And I thought that was something we never really covered before, in which it was our dialogue was derived from those perspectives, celebrity inmate versus high profile, one being on their fame, the other being infamous based on what they've done, and then the differences in managing them. And I do feel that they sit on either end of the extreme. So I thought that was interesting. And as always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. Hopefully we get some more live interviews done. That would be pretty cool to get on site. Again, I would love to work with a production company, me, myself, Joe, or Russ, and really provide some insight into what it's like in those isolation units, like a restorative housing unit or a PC, because it was under attack in the Richard Allen case. And I think that's what brought our attention in, because we're not going to be used as a scapegoat. A person makes a confession. Now the system and the political agenda becomes a reason to get a murderer off free. That's disgusting. That's outright just an attack on the system. And I would love if, even if it's to help confirm a good decision made by the jury, to put a video together to show people the work that happens behind those walls, to make sure that we don't allow an inmate to decompensate in the manner that they said it was done. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.